Welcome to my video on using the Process app within Plotter post-processing. As the generic name might suggest, this kind of does all the basic post-processing you might care about. So let's put together a quick design here. I will just make a quick 8x10 design. I like this kind of squiggly, almost looks like handwriting, but it's absolutely not. And I'm just gonna blow out the margins here. So we just kind of get this squiggly lines all across the page and beyond the edges of the page. So we're going to save that. And so if we go to the Plotter post-processing location where you checked it out, I'm going to open that up in terminal window. Say Python main application.py. We're going to open up the file, select the file we just created, and I'm going to launch the process application. So there's a lot going on in the process application, but most of it is kind of the basic things that you might care about when post-processing something for getting it ready to plot. So at the top here, you see one file selected, input file with 10 inches, and then we've just got a whole lot of stuff here. So I'm just going to run through this real quick on a high level. We have three different crop options. One is to crop it to the viewport. And so what that means is that all of this text that is overwriting the edge of the page is going to get cropped. So there's that crop option. There's also an option to crop at a specific X starting and ending value and a specific starting and ending value for the Y. So you could just crop out a small section. And then there's also an option, which I just like to leave on just kind of as a safety thing, to crop to the page size, just so that we're not accidentally asking the plotter to go beyond kind of where I think the bounds should be. And so apart from crop, there's also an option to scale. By default, I have it set to scale to the size of the canvas here. So even if this was shrunk down within the margins of this design, it could scale that up to like 8x10. So this is something you can change or just uncheck this and it will ignore these boxes. You can also center geometries to the input file size. So it will take the file size, which it shows you here is 8x10, and it will try to center it. Not applicable in this case, but I'll leave it checked. Rotate, since the AxiDraw that I use is in kind of landscape mode, we do want to rotate this by 90 degrees. Plotter post-processing will try to be smart and suggest rotating it by 90 degrees when it thinks that the height is longer than the width. And then also we'll need to do the layout with a landscape mode, but we'll get to that in a second. So we'll rotate it by 90 degrees. In the middle here, we have a lot of the stuff that's kind of from the basic. If you open up the VPipe cookbook, you'll see that one of the main things that they suggest here is just read the file, line merge, line sort, reloop, line simplify, and then write it out. So within this space, you kind of get all of those things. You've got line merge, line sort, line simplify, reloop. The line merge tolerance, the line simplify tolerance. I have an inches in here, and these are kind of the default values, but you can change those if you want. So these are all checked by default as well, because I use those in basically every single piece that I process. And we're going to skip over the squiggle filter and the multiple passes for now and jump down to the layout. So in here, I have a number of different size options, and it tries to be smart and pick the closest one to your input file size. So this drop-down box will adjust these width and height boxes here, so you can change it to whatever you want. Or you can also jump in here and just manually change these. And so you could say 8x10 if you wanted to. So let's just click Show Output and see what this looks like. So you see we don't have the crop on input. So now it has scaled this down to fit within an 8 by 10 size, which is not what I was looking for. So I'm going to toss the crop input on. We'll try that again. Boom, there it is. Okay, that is exactly what we're looking for. That matches the design. If I open that up quick, matches the design, but of course is rotated sideways. And this has done all of those other standard kind of, line merge, line simplify, reloop kind of things. And so basically that's just ready to go. So that is just kind of a high level overview of the options here with processing. So let's look at some of the other options that we can use in the processing application. So here I have a design that's taking up just kind of the bottom half of this canvas. And so the top half is just totally unoccupied. So I'm just going to save this. And we're going to reselect to grab that file. And so if I look at process here, I want to crop the input. And if I just click show, what we get is we get the design, but it's now centered within the page. And I was kind of hoping that it would be, so the design, the intent is that it sits at the bottom of an 8 by 10 space here, but instead it's sitting kind of in the middle, which is not what we're looking for. So how do we keep this from moving? Well, it's moving for two reasons. One is because I have this center geometries to input file size, but also I believe the layout is also going to be doing that. So when you do a layout, it centers your geometry within the file size as well. And so that's something that I don't believe you can actually change. But what you can do is you can add a bounding box. So I'm going to add a bounding box, which just draws along the outline of the width and height. So we have a file that is being interpreted as an 8-inch by 10-inch space, and so we're going to draw a box that size with this color. The bounding box color is a random color that's generated based on the input file so that it does not overlap in the same color space. So if I take a look now and say show output, we now have this yellow bounding box, and you see that this is no longer in the middle of the design, but rather kind of where it should be on the outer part here. So now we do have, a box that we have to deal with, but at least this is now kind of laid out in the correct orientation on the paper. And the bounding box itself can be simply removed by using the Decompose app in Plotter post-processing. And so reference that video to see how to do that. So let's take a look at some of the other fun things that Process can do for us. First of all, we're going to create a few new designs. So I'm just going to save a couple different designs here. And we'll just do 3 of them. So Process, much like Occult, can batch up operations on multiple files and use the same recipe to process multiple files at the same time. So I'm going to reselect the files. I'm going to select the 3 that I just created. And you can see here in the terminal, these are the currently loaded files. And if we open up Process, Process in general runs from top to bottom, left to right, but you can always verify the order of the commands if you look in the terminal. So you can see up here we now have 3 files selected. And if I show output, it will show just one of the files. And so that's one of our files here. And you can see, you can compare what's happening in this box with what's happening in the terminal here. So, we're not cropping, we are scaling. If you see here, we say read, no crop. We say scale 6 inches by 6 inches. And then we're laying out, so we're centering the geometries to the input file size. We're not rotating, so it's a rotate of 0. We're doing a line merge, a line sort, a line reloop, a line simplify. All of those things that are kind of checked off here, you can just verify what order they're being done in here. So if you needed to, you could always copy this command out, edit it, and reorder it if you wanted to do something more manual. But basically, everything is kind of going top down, left to right in these different sections here. So let's take a look at some of the fun things we can do, like the squiggle filter. So the squiggle filter is something that you can take straight lines, as you can see here, and when we add the squiggle filter, it makes them wobbly. You can make this kind of a hand-drawn effect almost. It makes you can change the amplitude of the lines if you want to. There's the squiggle amplitude in inches and the period of the squiggle here, and so it's kind of randomized squiggles. I just think it's a fun little thing you can add to different designs. And like everything else that's blue here, if you click on this, it will take you to the command line vpipe documentation for squiggle here. And so there's just the different options here. In addition to squiggle, there's multipass. Multipass adds a second pass to all lines. And so if I check multipass, the vpipe viewer now looks like this. And these lines look a little strange, but this is trying to indicate that we are drawing from here to here and back to here. And so it's multiple passes on each line. If the draw order matters to you, you should consider not doing the line sort if you want all of them to be drawn in the same way. So that's just something to note. Multipass is great for doing gel pens and other things that you might want to kind of thicken up or have multiple passes on. So this is what the lines look like when you have multipass turned on. It's a good kind of visual indication that, something's happening here. It's kind of hard to indicate that otherwise. And then lastly, we have the randomized line order, and that does exactly what it sounds like. So, we have line sort here, which attempts to put them in an optimized kind of way so that the drawing time is minimized, and then randomized line order will just change them entirely. So let's look at what it looks like without the line shuffle. So if you show in the upper left corner, if you go to show pen up trajectories, you can see that we're kind of jumping from here to here. We're jumping from here to here and here to here. So it's like you can see that the trajectory of the pen ups are very minimal. So if I instead turn off line sort and do line shuffle, and then we look at the pen up trajectories, it's all over the place. This is useful if you don't want to draw all of the same lines in a very kind of overlapping section immediately right after each other, because that can maybe tear up the paper a little bit. And so randomizing the line locations can be useful. And that covers, I think, most everything in this application. Processing really is just kind of a generic, get all of the basic stuff out of the way in terms of cropping, scaling, laying things out, and doing the basic vpipe commands: line merge, line sort, line simplify, reloop. I think, we can talk about reloop here. Let's do that. So when we talk about reloop, we're talking about closed shapes that have the start and end in the same point. And so you can see here the start and end of these points. And so let's just save this file, and we will reselect it with our plotter post-processing app and open up process. So first, let's turn reloop off. So you see here it says randomize seam locations on closed paths. That's what reloop does. So if I show the output here, you'll see that there's this kind of seam here. And when you plot this, your start and end points are going to be all lined up. And as I'm sure you know, if you've done a little bit of plotting, when the pen is dropped and when the pen is lifted, there's usually just a little bit of extra ink left there. And when it's a closed path, you get that same point with both the drop and the lift. And so you get a nice kind of larger blot of ink there. And when all of these line up, it becomes very apparent where that is. And so if I look at the pen up trajectories, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that it's starting, ending here, going to this one, going to this one, going to this one, and so on and so forth. And that is going to be an obvious seam, not unlike what it's kind of visually showing here. Whereas if you add in reloop and then you show it, you'll see that you can see these dots here. So these dots represent kind of the start and end point of them, of each kind of shape. And if you open up show pen trajectories, you'll see that they're kind of all over the place. But what's important is that the seam is no longer just one kind of thin line across the whole shape. And lastly, I talked about batching before, but let's actually show that in action. So let me save a couple different files here. Ooh, that one's crazy. We'll do 4 of them. And if I go to my downloads folder here, if I reselect the files, I'm just going to select all 4 of these. So processing can batch up files and run the same commands on everything. So let's say crop input, I won't scale, don't need to center, line merge, line sort, line simplify, reloop, yes, 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 yes. And we'll lay it out on a letter-sized paper. And we don't have to do landscape in this case. Crop to page size, I like to leave it on. But in this case, it's not necessary. So let's show that. So again, this will just show one example of what that looks like. That's our kind of most recent one over here. And that looks exactly how I want it to. So I think that is perfect. So when you show, you will get this plotter post-processing temp folder here. And this is that file that we just showed. And you'll see that it has an _p. That's to indicate that it has gone through the process application. But I'm going to just click, I'm going to get out of the downloads, or out of the temp folder rather, and I'm going to click apply to all. So this is going to do all 4 of the files. And you see, we now have 4 different files that have been output from that process, all with the _p attached. So these do not overwrite the existing files, but if I were to reselect the original files and reprocess them and apply to all, it would overwrite all of these files here with _p. So if it matches the name, if the output file name matches the name of an existing file, it won't hesitate to overwrite it. But we don't overwrite the initial file here, and that's so that you can trace kind of this to this, and then if you're doing multiple steps, perhaps you're going to compose, or perhaps you're going to decompose, or whatever it might be. We just keep on appending these different kinds of things to the end, and _p is just meaning that it's for processing. So that's the process application. Very useful. I use it all the time for the kind of most general processing things, cropping, scaling, all of the simplifying and optimizing of files, and then laying it out on a specific size of paper. So if this was useful to you, please let me know. Please consider supporting me over on Patreon, and thank you very much.